You know, I occasionally have an idea for a video and I'm like, that could probably get some good views. I mean, not like Mr. Beast level views, but like, you know, like a medium-sized handful of views. And then I think, you know, that video idea involves one of the most beloved children's franchises of all time. So if this goes wrong, I could potentially tick off a large, passionate portion of the internet, and they could leave hundreds of angry comments on my video. And that scares me and gives me lots of anxiety. But then I think, if they leave lots of angry comments on my video, that will just help it in the algorithm. And I already have anxiety around making art, so what's the real loss here? Hey y'all, I'm Drake and this is Drake Makes Art. So a few weeks ago, Netflix released the first teaser for their new live-action Avatar: The Last Airbender series. And, I mean, it was basically nothing. It was just the icons of the four elements made in some sort of 3D modeling software, probably like an Autodesk Maya or something like that. We didn't get to see Appa or Momo or any of the other really important characters, and I'm not salty about it at all. Not at all. But anyway, seeing that gave me this idea to create a series of art pieces based on the four elements, you know, earth, water, air, and fire, and use those elements as like my primary medium to create the art pieces. And I thought it would be cool if I could make each art piece represent a bender of that particular element from the show. So I would be like using the element to make the benders, which would make me like a bender because I'm bending the elements to make the benders. And I'm doing it with all four elements. So if I'm bending all four elements to make benders, does that make me the Avatar?
Go to your room!
Yes, that is what this series is. I am on a quest to become the art avatar of YouTube, bending all four elements to make art. Let's do this. So this week we're going to start with water, which is right up my wheelhouse because I do watercolor on this channel all the time. And what is watercolor but waterbending for non-benders? Oh my god, that's such a stupid line.
Go to your room!
Anyway, let's get started on this piece.
So even though the point of this series is to create artworks using the four elements of water, earth, fire, and air, and I'll eventually be creating a watercolor piece this week, I decided to start by doing my outlines digitally, mainly because I'm not a cartoonist and I knew I'd probably have to draw my figures several times over and over again to get things right. Plus, it's a little bit easier to composite several images together for tracing if I work digitally first. Since the element we're going to be working with for this piece is water, I knew I needed to focus on a waterbender, and who better to immortalize in watercolor than the greatest waterbender of her generation, Katara. I knew I wanted a dynamic action pose that was true to the bending style portrayed in the show, and after reviewing a few key moments in the series, I decided to base my sketch on this image, which is pulled from the fight with Hamlet the Bloodbender in Season 3. However, during this battle, Katara is in her Fire Nation outfit, which is cool and all, but it's not really instantly recognizable. So I also pulled a few references for her classic Water Tribe outfit, and I got a new face for her because, number one, what is this face? And number two, she needs her hair loopies.
So, fun fact, I found this out while I was researching my references. Turns out Katara's hair loopies weren't part of her original design. They were added in after the fact when they started animating her, because the animators said that it helped make her hair easier to animate. Why does it make her hair easier to animate? Yo no sé. I'm not an animator. But that's what I found out, and I thought that was a cool fact.
Once I'd established a good baseline composite, I traced the images over and over again, refining my design with each iteration. The hands were particularly tricky. It was hard to not make them look like claws, but I eventually settled on something that looks passable, we'll say. Though I'm not sure what I was thinking with those legs. Ooh. Next, I printed out the line work and transferred it to a piece of homemade tracing paper. Now this was my first time ever making tracing paper, and it worked okay, I guess. If you don't know how this process works, you take a piece of printer paper, paint it with cooking oil, let it dry in the sun, and it turns into tracing paper. As you can see from this footage, it really works as tracing paper pretty well, but it also left these grease marks all over the image I was tracing, and I didn't have this problem with the watercolor paper I eventually transferred to, so maybe the side that was face down when I was tracing was the side I had originally painted the oil on, and I just hadn't let it dry long enough, maybe? I don't know. I give this a 6.5 out of 10. It works, but with unintended consequences and greasy fingers. So now that I had my line work on my watercolor paper, it was time to actually get into the waterbending portion of the artwork. To really capture the organic watery effects that you can only get with watercolor, I decided to paint the entire piece using wet-on-wet techniques, which presented a bit of a challenge because typically wet-on-wet techniques is used for broad washes in large areas, like skies, not the small spaces you see in this drawing. But I really wanted that wet-on-wet look, so I decided I would use very small brushes to paint my water and pigments. I'd go one color at a time, and I'd use a hairdryer in between colors to set the pigments in place and keep the colors from running into each other. I used my wife's diffuser for this because we don't have a regular hairdryer. This process actually went pretty quickly. I had a reference pulled up on my computer, which is sitting just off screen from what you can see here, and honestly, I think I spent more time mixing colors than I did actually painting the piece, but that's typically the case for any artwork I make. And it was definitely worth it because I think I did a pretty good job matching the colors. I did have to remix the skin tone a few times, since the water tribe is based on the Inuits and other Native American cultures, and the first skin tone I made was just a little bit too white. Like Caucasian or European, but I added a little more red and umber and eventually got to a much better representation of Katara's skin tone. The part of this piece that I was most looking forward to was painting the water ring that Katara is bending around her, and I think it turned out absolutely great. I layered several different colors into this area, drying and reactivating the pigments several times to let them all flow and bend into each other. This was one area where I wanted the colors to mix and blend and flow. And when I finished painting, I went back over my outlines with a nice fine liner just to clean things up real nicely. And I decided that the areas that are supposed to be behind the water ring, like Katara's chest, I'd leave without outlines, just to try and really sell the distortion effect of the water. And so here's the final result. I really, really love this piece, actually. I'm very happy with the way it turned out. I mean, it definitely has its flaws, like those eyes. I'm not really sure what happened there, probably a transfer error. But overall, I'm really proud of how this turned out, especially that water ring that she's bending. I love how the colors blended to create this really organic texture, and these colors. These blues are some of my favorite colors on the entire color wheel. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you did, then please hit that like button to let YouTube know that you liked it. And if you think I've earned it, then click the subscribe button to see more content like this. Thank you so much again for watching, and I'll see you next time when we make something new. Bye. Also, next week we conquer Earth, which means we get to meet the real star of the show, the one, the only, Momo.
Go to your room!